Peter Goselin is a member of the National Lawyers Guild in Connecticut. Excuse me. And a labor attorney and a longtime fighter for justice. Ladies and gentlemen, Peter!
Can I take this off of you? Go right ahead. All right. So my immigrant ancestors were French Canadian. We talk with our hands, and trying to speak into a mobile microphone, it's like trying to thread a needle for me. So here's the thing. When they ask the lawyers to speak, one of our jobs is to talk about the law. And I'm going to try not to put you to sleep. But I think it's something that's worth talking about here. Because, you know, we heard an explanation over the last couple of weeks. We have heard an explanation for the state's positions refusing refugees that isn't necessarily on the face of it easily apprehended as being racist or bigoted or xenophobic. But when you know the history and when you know the legal implications of the terminology, it reverberates. Somewhere in the back of your mind you start thinking about this connection. Because what's that explanation? What's the explanation that isn't, oh no, we can't have Syrians or Muslims living in our state? The explanation is, well, we have the right to make that decision in our state, to keep people out. Sound familiar? This is states' rights. Now, that's what I want to talk about for a couple of minutes, states' rights. Now, where did the states' rights movement originate? Well, you know, if you know your American history, you know that the original states' right was the right of slave owners to secede from the United States and form a nation based on slavery. That's right. That was the original states' rights. After they were defeated and Reconstruction was going on, and African Americans, former slaves, were being given the right to vote and own land and own property. Once again, states' rights. States' rights meant the right to organize the Ku Klux Klan in your state. It meant the right to hang black people. It meant the right to lynch. It meant the right to burn. It meant the right to castrate. It meant the right to hire people as sharecroppers. It meant the right to exploit. That's what states' rights meant, and that's where it comes from. That's right. And we know that's where it comes from because we know in the 1930s, when the entire nation was in a Great Depression, there was a discussion in Congress about something called the minimum wage. Where did the opposition to the minimum wage come from and why? It came from the southern states who said, states' rights. We don't want to have to pay black people the same as white people. That's what they said. In the halls of Congress, on the floor of the Senate, they said, we do not want to have to pay black people the same as we pay white people. That's what states' rights is. The 1950s and 1960s, the great uprising, the great civil rights movement in this country, states' rights was right front and center. States' rights said, that little girl doesn't have the right to go to the school that my kids go to because she's black. States' rights said, I have the right to have a separate but equal bathroom in a public place, which we know was not separate. It was certainly separate, but it was certainly not equal. States' rights meant the right to separate but equal schools and universities and lunch counters and hotels and train cars and buses. It meant being able to segregate between black people and white people. That's what states' rights meant. Let's move forward a little bit more. You know, a lot of that same racism is still there. We're seeing it today. We saw it in South Carolina, where a white gunman walked into a church in the middle of a prayer session, shot the place up, killed a bunch of folks. What happened? The police took him to Burger King. Before they took him to the station to book him, they took an armed terrorist and said, hey, let us get you a Whopper. That's states' rights. That's the notion that somehow state sovereignty means that it's okay to be racist and it's okay to disobey the laws of the land. But it's not just white and black. Within the last few years, we've also seen a discussion about states' rights. States' rights supposedly means that it doesn't matter that the Supreme Court says that the law of the land is that any two people are allowed to be married to each other. That same-sex couples and opposite-sex couples have the same rights to be married. And the states' rights activists once again said, oh no, we want to have the right in our state to say no, to not issue marriage licenses, to not allow people to be married even though the Supreme Court says you can be married. And now, yet another lie. States' rights says you have the right to defy federal immigration policy. People who are here lawfully in the United States can be told, no, you cannot come to our state. That's the legacy of states' rights. When Donald Trump stands up and spews his hate, it's not a vacuum. It's not something happening in a vacuum. It's not because he's just a bad person. It's a legacy of hundreds of years of states' rights rhetoric based on the idea of segregation, exclusion, bigotry, and xenophobia. And that's what we're here to stand up against, because we're not going to take it. I look out in this audience. This audience isn't just white people. It's not just straight people. It's not just binary people. It's not just people who were born here. It's not just people whose first language is English. And it certainly as hell is not just people who grew up in the state of Connecticut. The notion that somehow this state has the ability, any state has the ability to say, oh no, we're going to decide who can be here and who can't. It's nonsense. But that's the legacy that Trump has been seizing on and using and whipping up his hatred around. Now, several of the speakers have talked about how important it is for us to talk about facts. At this point, I suspect an awful lot of folks here already know this, but I just want to emphasize this point because it is part of the legal discussion that's been taking place. And I want you to think about the legal issue, but I also want you to think about the implications, the political issue. These governors announced that they would not allow Syrian refugees in their states. And you may very well have heard that because we have federal immigration policy, the states don't have the authority to say no. And that's true. And that's the legal fact. But now let's think about the political implications of that fact. Because that means that when the governor of a state stands up and announces that his state will not allow refugees, he knows that he's telling a lie. He knows that he is telling his constituents something that is simply not true. He knows he has no ability to enforce it. So then you have to ask yourself, well, if a governor knows, or a senator or a congressman, if they know that this is not possible and it's not legal and that no court in the land would uphold it, why do they say it? Why do they pretend that it's true? And there is only one reason, because their goal is to whip up as much bigotry, racism, xenophobia, and hatred as they possibly can. That's their agenda. Nobody's fallen asleep yet. All right. I'm certainly proud to live in a state where the politicians know that they must get in line with the people and support the rights of refugees to come to the United States and to come to Connecticut. But I don't buy this states' rights business. We have a federal constitution, we have a federal Bill of Rights, and in every corner of the United States, in every place that is called U.S. territory, that Bill of Rights applies. And that means that There's no such thing as a place where it ought to be safe to shoot up a Planned Parenthood clinic. The Constitution doesn't allow it, the Supreme Court doesn't allow it, the law doesn't allow it, and we say no to it. We have a federal Constitution and a federal Bill of Rights, and it says that all citizens have the same rights, and that all persons have the same rights under the law. And there is no corner of this country where a police officer ought to be able to say, get out of your car because you're black. I'd let the white guy go, but you know what? I think you looked at me funny, so I want you to get out of your car while I get out my club. There is no place in the United States where that should be tolerated. There is no place where we will tolerate it. Ever since 1964, and I hate to say it's only since 1964, the law has said that it's illegal to discriminate against women. And only since the 1970s has it been illegal to interfere with a woman's right to make certain important reproductive choices and control her own body. But the plain fact of the matter is that it doesn't make any difference if you're in Kansas or Connecticut. The Supreme Court says you have the right to an abortion. You have that right, and we're going to fight for it. When I was out in the crowd this morning a while ago, somebody said, and hey, I understand it. I totally get this. I've felt this way myself plenty of times. Brother says to me, you know, kind of wish that we could have like a rally about this issue and it was only about this issue. And I understand that I'm sympathetic to that point of view, but you know what? The plain fact of the matter is, it's never just about that issue. Because the people who want to take away the right of women to control their own bodies are the same people who want to be able to lynch black people. That's right. They are the same people that want to be able to fire someone for being transgendered on the job. That's right. They are the same people who want to be able to make people wear a badge saying that they're Muslim. They're the same people who want to keep out refugees. They're the same people who want the United States to continue to put its boot on the neck of the nations of the world. And we say no. We say no to that. And we address those issues here, and we address those issues even though they may not sound like they have to do with refugees in Connecticut. But we address those issues here because we know now more than ever before we're all in this together. We're all in the same struggle. It's not just a struggle for one group of people or another. It's a struggle for humanity, and we know which side we're on. I was proud when Governor Malloy announced that Connecticut would welcome Syrian refugees, but I am much more proud to be here today in front of all of you, saying with you, we welcome refugees here in Connecticut.